Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Glasgow. Good afternoon, good evening, colleagues in Asia. I'm speaking to you from Colombo, and I really want to welcome you to this, the first of 3 virtual sessions on Asia Pacific, with a focus on water management. And of course, all of this is part of the Water Pavilion and Water for Climate at COP26. So I hope you'll find something out of these 3 sessions we're going to run. My name is Simon Langan, and I'm the Director of Water Data Science and Digital Innovations at IMI in Sri Lanka. And that's where I'm speaking from you today. In putting these 3 days together, we are very grateful and honored to be joined in a collaborative partnership with colleagues from the Asian Development Bank water section and colleagues from UN Sri Lanka. And they are joining us today. So Nita, Hannah, thank you and your colleagues for all of the work in joining me. This has very much been a partnership approach. So we have 2 hours a day starting today, and today is agricultural water management and climate change. Tomorrow, Wednesday, is water resilience and disaster, and Thursday is cities and infrastructure. Across these events, we have about 30 participants from 14 plus countries in the region and about 20 different organizations. So hopefully you'll get a diverse flavor and view of some of the issues and where we're going and some of the impacts for climate change and water management. So I hope you find it interesting, but I also hope you appreciate that this is logistically quite a challenge. So we're all learning from this. The format from each day is about the same. So we'll start with a high-level panel, and today we have an introductory panel. Then we'll have an hour on exploring the issues, and then we'll conclude with a forward look, synthesis, needs, and messages through to Glasgow and COP26. In terms of outcomes, what are we really looking for? Well, I think we're really trying to raise the issues of water management in the region from a variety of perspectives, not from a single perspective, not from a single lens or a single geography, but across the region. And to send a series of messages to Glasgow and the COP26 on some of these issues and needs, and messages that help action. I think that's the stage we're at. So that is what I have in terms of preamble in trying to set the scene. So in terms of turning to today's session, what I'd really like to do is just briefly tell you about our 5 distinguished introductory panelists for the first half an hour or so. And they are Dr. Nita Pokrum, Chief Water Secretary of the Asian Development Bank. So Nita is an engineer by training. She has over 24 years of professional experience working with various organizations, private companies, UN, ADB, engineering consulting firms, and international non-government organizations. Also joining us is Mark Smith, Dr. Mark Smith, my boss. Mark was appointed as Director General of IMI in August 2020. Prior to that, he was the Deputy Director General for Research, and he brings with him over 25 years of experience of research and program management, water resources, agriculture, climate and sustainability. Also joining us today is Ms. Hannah Singh-Hamadi. Hannah is the resident coordinator in Sri Lanka and leads the UN country team of 22 resident and non-resident UN agencies. And she is the representative of the UN Secretary General here in Sri Lanka. Also delighted to have joined us Mr. Sushil Akhara from Nepal, from the Department of Ministry of Energy, Water Resources and Irrigation. Sushil is Director General of the Irrigation Department and in the Ministry of Energy, Water Resources and Irrigation in Nepal. He is a water resource engineer and obtained his MSc in Land and Water Development from UNESCO IHE in Delft. Finally, I'm absolutely delighted to join Anura Disanayake. Mr. Dissanayake is the Secretary of the Ministry of Irrigation here in Sri Lanka. Mr. Dissanayake obtained his Bachelor of Education at the University of Sri Yanavarapura. I can never quite get that right, I apologize. And is postgraduate from the University of Washington. He has held a variety of positions in international organizations and has served in the government of Sri Lanka over the last 10 years, holding positions as Secretary in Education, Technology and Innovation, and of course, irrigation. So welcome, panelists. Would you all like to switch those of you on the introductory panel? Sushil, you're on. Hannah, would you like to switch your camera on? Mark? Anura.
My camera is on, no?
Okay, yeah, now I can see you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why I see and what I don't see. I don't get the panel view. Somewhere I need to change my panel view. Okay, so Hannah, I'm going to turn to you first. We've got, like I say, about 25 minutes. And maybe you'd like to say a few opening remarks, and then if you get a chance, or hope you will get a chance, just to make some comments on two of the questions. So the first question is, what do you see as the major issues, challenges, and opportunities we face in adjusting to the impact of climate change in relation to water systems and specific agricultural water management from your perspective? And then secondly, looking to the future, how can the wider international community help? Are there any specifics? So sure. Over to you, Hannah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon, and thank you all. It's really a pleasure to be participating with all of you, and special thanks goes to the International Water Management Institute and the Asian Development Bank for working alongside the UN in bringing together this important discussion. I have to say this is a very, very close issue to my heart. I've worked on water and sanitation in two of the countries, at least in the panel, Nepal. I don't know whether Mr. Acharya would remember in my capacity as the head of UNICEF there. And I worked also in Maldives. So a very, very important area and very close to my heart. So thanks for bringing us together on that. And it really is an honor to have participants from different countries as well. So I hope we will be having a very interesting discussion to an area that is of absolute importance to survival. For me, water challenges are a survival issue now. So just to turn into your first question, Simon, the main issue observed in Sri Lanka is a combination of changes in temperature and rain patterns. So the analysis now is showing that the temperature suggests that Sri Lanka has experienced warming of around 0.8 degrees Celsius over the 20th century. With regards to precipitation, according also to the recent World Bank study, a general trend of decreasing annual precipitation in the latter half of the 20th century has also been observed. So these two factors are further amplified by more severe and frequent droughts and storms. Taking this together, the result is a reduced water availability for agriculture, soil erosion, salt water intrusion, which we see, and an overload of irrigation system. So what does this mean in practice now, and the direct impact on the people and the community? One specific of such example would be, really, we have reached a point where the impossibility of some villages to cultivate during the drought period due to these global climatic changes. On the ground, this translates into loss of income, and thus farmers often need to take money from local money lenders, putting them at risk of entering into a perpetual cycle of debt, according to the study done by ILO. Furthermore, according to the same study, we see that due to the job losses, children may end up having a drop of school at an early age to start working and help the family. Now, and the vicious cycle doesn't stop here. As another local study suggests, smallhold farmers affected by climate change also tend to migrate to urban centers in search of alternative income sources. So family members of such seasonal migrants are thus highly vulnerable to exploitation, especially, and I need to add the gender aspect here,
Hannah, sorry, you've gone on to mute somehow. Just that last sentence, it switched to mute.
Yes, sorry. I said that we need the direct impact on the gender issue is that the family members of such seasonal migrants are highly vulnerable to exploitation, especially when women stay behind in rural areas to take care of children or elderly family members. Therefore, women end up facing a triple burden of household and childcare duties, agricultural responsibilities, and a need of and a need for additional income and food generation. Okay, so what are the opportunities now? What are some of the opportunities in front of us in the context of Sri Lanka? And I'm sure my colleague, Mr. Anura, will clarify even more. But I would like to highlight two. First, we can begin by bringing about changes across the full spectrum of agriculture process to ensure that in future food production systems are more diverse, sustainable, and resilient. In this sense, when managing water, irrigation needs to be much more ambitious, shifting away from simply maximizing crop yields to maximizing net benefits across a range of water uses, including ecosystems and nature-based solutions. Second, we can help build links and partnership between key actors, who all hold different parts of the solution. In Sri Lanka, when it comes to water system, one of the challenges we are observing are at the institutional level. Infrastructure is lagging behind the global demand, resulting in general inefficiencies as well as regional disparity that can impact health as well. So tapping into the capacity of the private sector could be beneficial, but we can also make use and make sure it happens in the right way. One of the studies UNDP had done suggests that there are still issues with the commodification of water and industrial sector extracting water responsibly, given given space for better policy and regulations on water management. All right. So much scope really. There is much scope to turn these challenges into opportunities through the right technical support, the right scientific evidence, and this is where we need and we must go beyond boundaries and we need to address it holistically at a global level. So this is my response to your first question.
Okay, Hannah, that was great. Thank you, and thanks for the enthusiasm. Look, can I just carry on going around the table, and we'll come back to you for the second question, sure, if time allows. I've just got to play this as I go. So, Sushil, maybe I could come to you, and just at the other end of Asia, maybe you could give us some insights, either on looking to the future, how can the wider international community help, or indeed tell us something about the major issues. Is that okay, Sushil? Are you there?
Thank you, Simon. I'm very pleased to participate in these sessions. As we all know that Nepal is a hilly country. More than 75% of the land area is very slope with fragile geology. And the climate is monsoon climate where more than 80% rainfall on an average. Annual rainfall is 1600 mm. Among 1600, more than 80% rainfall occurred during June, July, August, September, 4 months in a year. So it means that the intensity of the rainfall is very high and the geology is very weak. And this is the climate, but the climate change scenario, because of the climate change, the intensity of the rainfall is changing in the local levels. Very high intensity of the rainfall in the short period. And because of that, our irrigation system, where more than 17,000 irrigation systems exist in the hilly area, very small irrigation systems, the high intensity rainfall with small catchment that have effects more on the more damaging effects on the irrigation systems. So operation and maintenance costs are being high, and siltation over the farmland, the loss of the fertility, erosion of the farmlands are commonly, we are facing the problems. Because of that, the farmers' incomes, farmers' livelihoods, and returns from the state investment on the irrigation sector it's lower. Overall, it's impacting the economy of the country and the society. So for that, because of the global effect, international practices, good practices, research and development works, we have collaboration among international society and countries is necessity. And in our experience, smallholder irrigation schemes are better for combating the negative effects of the climate change, promoting the capacity of the farmers, promoting the capacity of the local levels, promoting the technology of the small-scale irrigations, either from the lifting surface, either surface irrigation or lifting groundwater irrigations or lifting from surface source, construction of the small storage system in the hill area. That will be seems very effective. So we have initiated some programs. So to minimize the effects, the research and development works among sharing of the combined results in the research and development works, sharing of the best practices, empowering the small farmers. I think that will be a better solution to combat the negative effects of climate change. And since the agriculture sector is the main sector for transformations of the economy and socio-economy of the society, the negative effects in the agriculture water should be compensated by the means of the crop or by means of the technology or by means of the awareness program or by means of the knowledge transfers. I think this is fine. Thank you.
Sushil, that was great. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Nita, maybe I could come to you, and again, as one of the partners in this, please, some opening remarks, and then if you'd like to pick up either question 2 or question 3, or indeed question 1. So the third question. So the first question, major issues. Second question is looking to the future, and the third one, expectations from Glasgow. So I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Simon. Yes, I think both Hannah and Sushil mentioned the issues very well and vividly, though of course Asia is very diverse and we cannot say one solution in one part of Asia or one challenge in one part of Asia will be the same. We are also the most disaster-prone region. So if you look at Pacific, the challenges there are quite different. But again, if I may just start by thanking both IMI and the UN to partner with us to bring this. And I also agree with you, the voices of Asia need to be heard. Asia and the Pacific need to be heard. And I'm also proud to see we have such a great lineup of very diverse voices on that from many countries. So I hope the participants will join us for all 3 days, tomorrow and day after tomorrow, also to look at this myriad of voices, challenges, best practices, tools that we will talk about. Let me go straight to then the opportunities and actions part, Simon. For water management from our side, be it the supply side or sanitation, water resource or irrigation management, we see the challenges, and I'm combining both challenges and opportunities because you flip and the other comes next, lie in localizing the needs and the means to adapt to climate change. And if I may also mention, it's not the same worldwide, but in most of our countries, we see climate change typically driven and done at the central level. I'm emphasizing the word done also because policies are set there, finances are mobilized there, even implementation is attempted at managing and monitoring there. So national leadership is extremely important. We work with national governments a lot for setting the NDCs, setting the long-term strategies and combating climate change, because the nature of it is global and you do have to tie it to the regional. But what this top-down approach we find Simon does is it often results in two things. One, complete lack of ownership and leadership by the local entities, be it water utilities, municipalities, village council, water resource managers, irrigation managers, what they can do, what they should do when it comes to planning, implementing, or financing climate resources, they're not in the picture yet. It has become someone else's business. Second, it gets reinforced when they are so not in the loop and when everything is done centrally, that it is beyond their means. It's unimaginable, unattainable. How do you deal with it when you think something is outside their operations and beyond their sphere of influence? Where do you even start? How do you convince your taxpayers or your leaders what you need to budget for when you're not even clear what the tangible entry points are for you? And how are you going to get there? So at the Asian Development Bank, this is what we're working on. As many of you know, we predominantly support our member countries through project lending. That means we are on the ground. We have relationship with thousands of entities, again, municipalities, village councils, river basin managers, irrigation managers, water utilities, be it urban or rural. So, and we also have a very healthy water sector portfolio. Despite COVID fiscal crunch, it hasn't really affected yet. Let's hope. And we see actually when we look at the pipeline, it's also quite a healthy pipeline for the next 10 years. We will be adding another $10 billion and our current portfolio is over 20 or close to $20 billion in the water sector. So how do we use this opportunity now to bring it home, localize, bring it to the water managing entities to build their capacity and help them find these tangible entry points towards water resilience? Because once you understand your risks, your actions, you are better able to gauge who of your stakeholders, the government, the local leaders, the businesses, the taxpayers are better able to share those risks. And we hope this will also help create a demand for resilience. It cannot be top down. You cannot say you need to do this. What's in it for you? You need to be able to visualize the actions that both Sushil and Hannah, the impacts that both Sushil and Hannah highlighted here. They need to visualize it. They need to lobby for it. And then they will also be our prime stakeholders in finding financing for water resilience from the local level. Because we cannot bring financing from outside when they're not involved. They are the ones who will convince their taxpayers and their local businesses if we really are to mobilize local financing. And I think some of the other opportunities we see that is really largely untapped for agriculture is, of course, digitalization. Hannah and Sushil both mentioned decentralization, harnessing nature-based solutions, hybrid solutions. We're not even scratching the surface on those. Better choice of crops is a given. I think IMI is at the forefront of researching on that, using circular economy. And again, something that we haven't quite seen or used is spatial planning or land use planning better. And COVID also taught us that, perhaps we have no choice but to move closer to the urban centers. And again, how do we work together? Same, I might sound like a broken record, but localize resilience. Make it the water story is climate story is water story, but we're not involved. Bring it home to the local players. And by local, we don't just mean communities, we mean the water utilities, The irrigation managers on the ground. So we can join hands, bring technical assistance, bring capacity building with talking to each other. We barely do talk to each other, and we need to do more. And with that, we can see, again, COP needs to really say it is a local business. It's not central. It's not national business. It really needs to be driven bottom up, not top down. And I think we can do that. We can resonate it and amplify this as COP26. I'll stop here, Simon. Thank you.
Nita, that was fantastic. Thank you. You crammed in so much there. My ears kept pricking. So Laurent and myself are taking notes here to feed back to the illustrator. Of course, I can't help but thank you for referencing IMI and digitalization, but also, of course, the Director of Digital Innovation. But Anura, in there, Nita mentioned national leadership. So maybe you could just share with us in a few minutes some views from your perspective in the Ministry of Irrigation, or Secretary of the Ministry of Irrigation in Sri Lanka. So Anura, can I pass the floor to you for comments, and if you have chance to pick up on the question, looking to the future, how can the wider international community help? Anything specific, and also what are your expectations and outcomes? And then I'll finish with Mark. So Anura, to you, please. Anura, are you with us? We lost you.
There's no sound again, Simon.
I can't even see him appearing. Anura, I'm going to go to Mark. Apologies, we'll come back to you, Anura, but let me give Mark, and maybe we can get that sound thing sorted out. Mark, could I, Anura, you there? Yeah, Anura, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay.
please. Yeah,
okay.
Very good.
First of all, let me thank IMI and ADB for organizing this platform, and it's so pleasure to be with the three partners who are actively engaged in climate change resilient actions in Sri Lanka, UNDP, IMI, and then ADB. Since Hannah had given a very sound background information on the country's perspective, let me just touch on a few things. As we all know, Sri Lanka's topography is the central hills and the flatland, and then 103 rivers are coming from the mountains and goes to the Indian Ocean. And we were blessed with 6 rains per year conventionally, 4 intermittent showers and 2 monsoons. And then with those rains, we are getting approximately 2,000 millimeters of rain. The quantities still remain almost same, but the patterns of rain had caused us these additional challenges which we were not geared towards. So I'm just to mention, the quantify the amount of water that we get from the rains per year is approximately 150,000 million cubic meters of water falls from the rains, all these showers and rains, and then and out of which 55,000 MCMs will fall into capturable areas, but we were able to retain only 10,000 MCMs out of 150,000 MCM which falls into our island. So we can see it was in conventional or before climate change challenges. We had these intermittent showers, and then it was spread across. Now we have more rains in the central hills, and then dry lands are getting dry and dry. So this retention of 10,000 MCMs will not really help to manage the way that we were managing earlier. And then can you imagine these 50,000 MCMs, which only retaining 10,000 balance, 140,000 is going to Indian Ocean with erosions, and then the silting and so many things. So these are the new challenges we face as the Ministry of Irrigation. And Ministry of Irrigation is responsible for management of water to cater to agricultural, drinking, industrial and service sector and renewable energy sectors. And we are also responsible for watershed management. And during last 10 years of climate change impact into the Central Hills has caused us torrential rains into the hills and then land degradation and then silting of most of the big reservoirs. So this is the situation that we are facing, and we are all conscious about it since we have been highlighted as one of the vulnerable countries in the climate change index, which helped us to show our case into international partners. And then we are working very closely with ADB. ADB's investment on Mahaveli Water Security Investment Program, one of the largest river basin management program. ADB is working with us, and we are making water transfers from a region, Central Mountains, into very dry areas. Unless otherwise we do so, there will be a mass movement of people and wildlife from those areas to Central Hills. And then we are working very closely with UNDP on climate resilience, a small tank program with the Green Climate Fund in dry zones to keep and change and make the cultivation patterns adaptive and resilience to this climate change vulnerabilities. And then we just began discussion, and we will be working with IMI on watershed management in the Central Hills with the World Bank support. So we are conscious, and we are developing our partnerships and trying to introduce the new technologies, and then to bring about lessons learned from neighboring countries and the rest of the world. So basically, these partnerships will certainly help us in finding some kind of a solution which we are looking for.
Anura, thank you very much. That was great, and I'm glad you could connect. I was a bit worried at one point, but that's great. Okay, we're up against time, but we do have 5 minutes left. I did warn Chaturanga that I would run slightly late. So Mark, as the panelist who is actually in Glasgow, please, would you like to share some views, opening remarks, and what you're seeing from Glasgow, or messages, whatever you think would help direct the panel or the rest of the session today? Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Simon. And yeah, I just add my thanks to our partners in this endeavor over these coming 3 days, ADB and the UN. We're really grateful for you coming together with us to pull together these sessions, which I think they're incredibly important to make the connection between the dialogue in the region and what's going on here in Glasgow. And I'm really, really grateful that the Water Pavilion provides a means to do that, which is a physical space in Glasgow, but it's also a virtual space globally. And so far working really, really well. I really do appreciate the comments that have been made by my fellow panelists. I think they point towards there being a really rich set of discussions, Simon, coming up over the coming 3 days. In terms of the case for water, for prioritizing water and adaptation, I think that's so clear. It's so clear if you look at the evidence in the IPCC report and so on. But we need to keep pressing, to keep raising the spotlight on water, so that indeed the opportunities attached to it for really taking effective action on adaptation are clear to people, and they're clear to those that are making decisions about finance and those that are making decisions about what we should be doing best to help, as we're talking about today, to help farmers across the region. And there's plenty we can do, of course, whether it's wastewater reuse or irrigation, or working on storage and different ways of meeting storage needs, managing droughts, insurance for farmers, nature-based solutions, etc. There's lots and lots that we can be doing. But I agree very much with you, Nita. I thought you expressed that so clearly, that we need to localize resilience. And that's also a matter of being very systems oriented as we think about how we do adaptation. And so linking not just those kinds of technological and infrastructural interventions, but with governance and institutions that indeed are effective at linking those higher level considerations in NDCs and ministries and so on with what really needs to happen on the ground, whether it's farmers or water utilities and so on. And then I think that's part of that's a huge part of the challenge going forward, is how to weave together those different elements, those systems elements of building climate resilience. Within that, I think there's a particular set of issues that the international community can help with, and that's to do with data and information. Historically, the process of planning for water resources, of planning for water-related investments and infrastructure investments and so on, was based on looking at historical data. What happened in a particular location in the past in respect of how much water you have, how frequent droughts are, how frequent floods are, how severe those floods are, etc., was based on our knowledge of what was historically the case. Now, because of climate change, that's increasingly no longer true, and particularly in some important parts of the world and important parts of this region. So looking back no longer can be the basis for how we plan water resources. So we need new tools for planning, new data and information tools, and new methodologies for ministries to use, for water utilities to use, to help build that resilience. And at the heart of that is the issue of assessing risk across future scenarios and having the data to do that, having data that's regularly updated, that is more and more real time. And of course, there's more and more technologies to help us do that. So system performance across multiple scenarios, looking toward the future as a basis for planning, will increasingly be at the core of the work of water management, at the core of the work of water and adaptation. And I think the international community has an important role to come and help countries across this region and other regions, other parts of the world, to make that shift in how they do that planning. In terms of expectations from Glasgow, well, who knows? I mean, I'm here, but it's hard to know concretely what's going to come out. I think what's good news is that the dialogue on water is always gaining traction, gaining visibility here. People are getting better and better, I think, at making that translation. It sounds silly, but making the translation between increased severity and frequency of drought and flood, for example, and the fact that requires you to take water management steps. That simple connection is often not made. I think the big debates here are focused around finance, around the intricacies and technicalities of emissions accounting, and the commitments that, of course, the different countries are making. Within that, what I want to see more and more of, I think, and it relates very much to this systems question that several of our panelists have pointed towards, is how do we get radical in our thinking about water as we go forward? Because, as I say, it's a different set of problems than it used to be, and we have to go fast now. We have to go deeper, and we have to go faster in terms of accelerating the kinds of systems changes that we need. So I'll leave that with the panel and for the session. Simon, how do we get radical?
Mark, thanks. And in fact, thanks to all our panelists. I am going to have to stop it there. And so this is my first learning outcome, is that we should have made this panel longer, because I think it set out both today, but I think for the subsequent 2 days, and I already can see a series of messages coming out of this. So really, I would like to thank you all. And let us continue. So this is seamlessly, we're going to move straight into the next element. So you don't have to leave this meeting. You can stay on. And I'm going to pass over the moderation duties to Chaturanga. I hope you're there. Great. I can see you from FAO Sri Lanka. So Chaturanga, I'll let you take us into I can't remember what I call this, the lessons session. Yeah. So please, to you. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Simon. Good afternoon to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who is joining from all around the world. What a great start to today's event, actually. That was a very compelling discussion. So I'm Chaturangi. It's too long. You can call me Chatu. I'm from FAO, Sri Lanka. So I will be moderating this second session of the Asia Hub, focusing on identifying challenges and opportunities in agriculture and water management, especially in the Asia region. So today with us, we have a panel of 7 distinguished experts who will be presenting on themes related to water resource management. These themes will be ranging from sustainable use of water resources for irrigation, agriculture purposes, and also use of technology for enhanced productivity and for mitigating climate risk. So without further ado, I warmly welcome our first speaker, Dr. Aditi Mukherjee, who is a principal researcher from the International Water Management Institute, to give us a brief synopsis of the findings from the IPCC's first working group's report with a special emphasis on Asia. Over to you, Dr. Mukherjee.
Thank you so much, Chaturangi, for hosting this session. And as you said, I would be providing the findings from IPCC's, but also a Hindu Kush-wide regional assessment that our partner organization ECMOD had done in a little while ago, because I thought that was quite relevant also for Asia, because glaciers are just so immensely important for the work that we do here. A lot of the slides that you will see are publicly accessible. These are a part of the IPCC's Working Group 1 summary for policymakers. So the first slide, what it really shows, and if you kind of put your attention to this last little chunk from 1850 to 2020, that's like the last 150 years. So basically what it shows is human influence has warmed climates, and this is unprecedented in the last 2000 years. I think this is something that we all know who are here, and all, I mean, entirely this has been caused by human emissions. The second important one, which I don't know if is getting enough attention, is that we are already in a 1.1 degree world. It's not as if climate change will happen and we have to look at the future impacts. The reality is that we are living in a climate change world. We are living in a 1.1 degree warmer world than it was in the pre-industrial period. And if anything, there has been some amount of masking of that cooling from aerosol emissions, which again, we know that is the developing Asia, which has a lot of these aerosol emissions and leading to air pollution. So the upshot here is that we are already living in a climate change world, and the impacts are also clear. I thought what was very interesting about this particular IPCC report was precisely these. The previous ones had longer chapters on the projected impacts and possibly shorter chapters on the observed impacts, because I don't think there was enough evidence or enough science to showcase observed impact. And that has drastically changed in AR6. As you can see, these are stylized maps, mostly to avoid all the political ramifications of boundaries, etc. But these are stylized maps of globe. And if you focus on the Asia part of it, South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, Tibetan Plateau, Western Central Asia, Eastern Central Asia, you can see that entire Asia, actually, the hot extremes have gone up, and these are very high confidence level, which means that several studies agree on these findings. When it comes to heavy precipitation, again, you can see this is Asia again. Entire Asia has seen increase in extreme precipitation, which is kind of, no other continent has seen as much increases in extreme precipitation as we see over Asia. The third one is around changes in droughts, specifically agricultural and ecological droughts. Again, we see parts of Asia, West Central Asia, East Central Asia, and East Asia, and also South Asia and other parts have actually seen increase in these kind of droughts. There are certain areas where there is a low agreement between the studies, but overall you can see that quite a lot of part of Asia, along with parts of Africa, that has observed increase in drought since 1950s. Now, when you come to the projected impacts, all of these impacts are projected to become become worse at every single degree of warming. And you can again see that most of those impacts at a 4-degree warming. And remember, with the current NDC, we are headed towards a 2.7 to 3-degree world. So we are actually going to be in between the 2-degree and the 3-degree unless our NDC ambitions go up or we start emission reduction faster. So you can see that majority of those impacts, both in terms of annual precipitation change, mean soil moisture, all of them are going to be concentrated in and around Asia. What another report of IPCC, it was a very influential report published 2 years ago. It has said that we need to limit our emissions reduce emissions by 45% by 2030 to be able to remain within 1.5. I think COP is again this year discussing the absolute necessity to keep within 1.5. 2 degrees far too warm for that matter. And I think Asia will play a very important role because the recent emissions starting from the beginning of the century, Asian countries, developing countries, China, India, and a lot of developing countries in Pacific have contributed to emissions. So Asia would also play an important role in mitigation as well as adaptation. Very briefly, but even 1.5 degree would be too warm for some of our regions. And one such region is the Hindu Kush Himalayas, where we are saying that even in a 1.5 degree world, we are actually looking at losing 1/3 of our glaciers by the end of the century. And the end of the century is not that far away. I mean, my daughters who were born in 2015 will be 85 years old, and my father currently is 85 years old, right? I mean, I can almost imagine how 220, 100, because it's actually something not that abstract or far away. Children who are born today will be merely 79 years old in 2100. So it's a future that's out there. We can touch it almost. And if we go up to 2-degree world, we are actually thinking of losing 49% of our glaciers, which is obviously a tremendously bad news for our region. Now, this is a picture that is, I thought, very, very interesting. This is a part of an expedition to the Mount Everest. At the behind that back, that is Mount Everest. And if you just put your eyes at one specific point, this was in 1922, I believe, and then a repeat photography in 2018 kind of shows the changes. You know, all the glaciers have melted, and what it has left behind is a glacial lake. And we are seeing increasing glacial lake disaster floods happening all around. If you want one more time, this is how it looked in 1928, and this is how it looks in 2008 or 9 or whatever is the year. And this is happening in all mountain ranges, but particularly in the Himalayas, which is like the water tower for all of us. And communities who depend on these snowmelt are being most affected, but also downstream communities would be affected. And this is where also climate justice things comes in. I was doing work in this remote Ladakhi village, and farmers were asking, what can we do? And the reality is that they can do precious little, because the glaciers aren't melting because of their actions. They hardly emit anything. So there is, I think, very intrinsic to the COP debate is also going the issue of climate justice. I may just skip these ones, but overall, this is some papers published in Nature. But what is showing that for South Asia, at least, the threat is not that we would be running out of water, because there would be also the models are projecting stronger monsoons, for example, but much of the impact will happen to the people in the upper reaches, which also our colleague from Sri Lanka was saying that is also the mountain reaches that are quite vulnerable that way. We are also seeing much increase in flood magnitude. Yeah, what can we do? Very generally, mitigate now. I think also Asia needs to think more aggressively around mitigation. Adapt as much as we can, because the reality is that our adaptation space becomes very, very constricted beyond 1.5 to 2 degrees. You cannot really adapt. There's a limit to what you can adapt. And finally, leave no one behind. There's the importance of just transition, which is particularly important for Asia because much of it is still developing. Yeah, this is my final slide. This is something that IPCC 1.5 degree report says, and it somehow stuck with me. Every bit of warming matters, every year matters, and every choice that we make today matters. And it again, I would say, matters very much for Asia, where a lot of our people do not have yet acceptable standards of living. So here we are actually in a double jeopardy, trying to improve standard of living while not emitting. So I think a lot of those climate change and developmental challenges will play out in Asia in unprecedented ways. Thank you so much, Chaturangi. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Mukherjee, for those highlights. Hot extremes, increased droughts, extreme precipitation events. I think they all present the reality of living in a planet that is already warmed by 1.1 degrees. I mean, this is not alarming enough to take immediate action to mitigate and adapt. I'm not sure what would. So next up, we have Dr. Mobin Ahmed. He's the research team leader for water and irrigation systems at the CSIRO. He will be presenting about climate change flows and irrigation responses using Indus Basin as a case study. Over to you, Dr. Ahmed.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay, let me share my screen. So my presentation will be building on what Aditi just presented, the situation in South Asia. So, and my presentation will focus some of the climate change impact on flows and irrigated responses, particularly in the Indus Basin irrigation system in Pakistan. So before I think most of you already know the Indus Basin, but for those who doesn't know, Indus Basin is a transboundary river basin shared between China, India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And the Pakistan is.
Robin, we're not seeing your screen if you're sharing it.
Oh. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry for that. So the Indus Basin is a transboundary river basin. It is shared between China, India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And Pakistan is the most downstream riparian. As you can see from this, like satellite image, which is captured from the Google Earth, the Pakistan heavily depends on its food security on the Indus Basin irrigation system, which is, like, if you can see my cursor, this is the area which shows the irrigated areas in Pakistan. So if you see the historically, the Pakistan population has increased considerably during last, like 6 to 7 decades. And as a result of that, as the population is going up, there was more and more food demand. And as a result of that, the cropped area has also increased in Pakistan. And most of these increases came from through the irrigated agriculture. As a result of the increase in irrigated areas, it also put a lot of pressure on the, water resources. Initially, if you can see in this graph, most of that water is coming from the, surface irrigation diversions, which has become more or less, stagnant and somewhat declining. And then, this was compensated with the groundwater pumpage, which has picked up largely from 1980 onward to continue with this cropping pattern. So if you can see, on the other side, on the other graph, the per capita water availability, when the country was created in 1947, it was over 5,000 cubic meter, and today it is below 1,000 cubic meter per person. So which means to meet the future demand, if the population continue to grow, more and more area food production will be needed, which means the water sources will be more and more under pressure. And this presents, like a major challenge and planning and management challenge for the policymakers, and particularly, like the Indus water resources are quite uncertain. A large fraction of the Indus water which is coming into the Pakistan, it is generated outside of the Pakistan boundaries, which means it comes from the, upper riparian countries. Some of the areas are highly dependent on snow and glacier melt. And then also it has 7 major tributaries, and it has very different flow patterns as well. Some are, largely driven by snow and glacier melt, and some are rain-fan dominated. So which means it brings water at a different places. Pakistan has a very limited storage. There are only 2 major reservoirs, Mangla and Turbela, which can store roughly on 10% of mean annual flows. And then it is, like being used in such a way that the equity is maintained within Pakistan to share water between two major, like agriculture areas in Punjab and Sindh. The climate change is happening, as Diti presented as well. As a result of that, like it has a two impact. One is that, like the globe is becoming more warmer, which means the more and more snow and glacier melts are happening. And also it's impacting the, like more precipitation is now occurring in the form of rain instead of snow, which means it is generating peak flows and which is causing flooding. And it is impacting the, like overall water availability over there. In the lower irrigated plain where the agriculture is practiced, the rainfall is very low. And this area is highly dependent on the, like the flow pattern from the upper side. And as a result of that, now it is leading to the unsustainable groundwater use. Salinity is also an important issue over there and complex issue. And then on the other side, because of the, like water sharing arrangement between different provinces, the water allocation rules are very complex. And most of the operational procedures are undocumented, which means there is a more pressure over there. So in 2012, with the ADB and the Ministry of Water and Power, they have a water sector task force was created, and they came up with the, like a major document, which is called 2012 Water Sector Task Force Report. So that report has basically concluded the business as usual is not an option for Pakistan. However, with better water management, Pakistan can double its agriculture production and it can triple its clean hydropower production. So one of the main thing which that report highlighted that the Pakistan need a repeatable evidence base to make a, like informed decision making to, like deal with the climate change issues, infrastructure development issues, and also, like explore food security and economic security for Pakistan. So why it's really important, because as I said earlier, that the Indus Basin system is in Pakistan is it's the water comes from the different tributaries. Storages are only available only on two rivers, and then as a result of that, the decision making become very complex. As you can see, that this is a planning process which happens. It comes look into the water which is coming into the, like this Jhelum Chenab system which is here. It's an Indus River System Authority assess how much water is available in the JC resources, and in the same way they look what is coming from the Indus and Kabul River. And then at the end of the day, they try to make sure that the both like the JC system as well as the Indus system has a similar water availability, so that everyone can have an equitable water supply. So this is one of the major challenge for ITSA to maintain this level of equity. So based on the recommendation of the Water Sector Task Force report, the Australian government funded CSIRO to develop and help Pakistan to develop some kind of decision support tools. And two particular things which we have developed is, one is the water apportionment accord tool, which replicate the 10 daily water allocation processes. And it's really important because currently this process is known only by 2 to 3 people. And then it is causing a huge confusion, as well as it's a very complex process. So we captured this thing into the water apportionment accord tool, which is now embedded and being used by ITSA to make a seasonal allocation decision making. The second thing is that we have developed the first daily river system model of the irrigated areas in Pakistan, and that model is we have used it to explore different water, food, energy, and access scenarios for Pakistan. So more detail on the project and the associated outputs are available on our website, which is given here. So we have used this framework to look into the.
Sorry, Dr. Mobin, just one more minute.
Yeah, I'm just
Okay,
second last slide. So we use this framework to understand what does it mean, like the supply and demand pattern in the, like in irrigated areas of Punjab and Sindh. As you can see here, that because of the climate change, the inflows from the upper Indus will change. There will be more supplies coming into the Kharif season, in the wet season, and there will be less supplies coming into the dry winter season, which means particularly in the dry season, there will be both in Punjab as well as in Sindh, there will be less water availability, which will lead to the more, like unsustainable groundwater use pattern, and it can have a severe impact on the wheat production, which is the main staple crop in Pakistan. So what are the future options to achieve this thing is, basically from our work, we conclude that it's a very complex thing. No single solution will work. Pakistan needs to explore both supply and demand management option. Supply management option particularly include improving the forecasting abilities, loss assessment. Pakistan need to develop a decision support system to do a quick mid-decision allocation decision making. They need to, also explore for more supply reservoir, large one at the upstream areas as well as on-farm storages. They have to consider the managed groundwater recharge, and the demand management options will be needed in the near future. And this includes to improve efficiencies to reduce the losses into the saline groundwater aquifer, as well as more importantly, Pakistan need to reconsider make policy adjustment to promote a type of cropping pattern which discourage the low value, high intensive crops like sugarcane, and likewise like rice is produced, which is consuming a lot of water, and it's exported. And in lieu of that, the policy should promote type of native crops like pulses and oilseed, which is more suitable for that kind of cropping pattern. So thank you very much. With that, I stop it here.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. What a fascinating example to show that agriculture and hydropower production can be enhanced by promoting equitable water resource allocation. Next up, we have Dr. Yele Bigma, a senior water resources specialist from the Asian Development Bank, to explain about the role of water productivity and remote sensing in improving irrigation under climate change. Over to you, Dr. Bigma.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen now. I'm a bit confused about the time that I have. I think it's a bit less than originally planned, or?
Correct. It is about 7 to 8 minutes, Dr. Bigma.
Right. Can I share my screen, or can you only do it?
No, you can share your screen. We can see it.
Okay.
Yeah. Mopi, could you stop sharing your screen?
Right. Thank you very much. So 7, 8 minutes, right?
Correct.
Good. I still see some thing here on, okay. Right, thank you very much. I'll quickly go through the role of water productivity and remote sensing in improving irrigation under climate change. I'll quickly tell you a bit about the context, then I'm zooming in from basin water assessment towards more local level through a project where we have done some work on storage, and then eventually through the real local day-to-day sort of management and irrigation scheduling. Why is it important? Of course, we all know, I think 75% of all water resources is diverted to irrigation. Food production accounts for almost 92% of all our water use in the world. And therefore we need a drastic increase in water productivity to also maintain sufficient water for other uses and to keep the food production at sufficient levels. If we have the status quo, we will have more and more, of course, irregular type of events that we don't have really planned for, and we get a worsened irrigation effectivity because of higher rainfall events and that are not necessarily stored, and lower larger droughts with larger problems in shortage of water in the systems. So remote sensing and water productivity are effective tools, and we can use them. And I'm going to give you a few examples of that. It's objective. This I always find a very nice caricature, and there's always a lot of discussion on the value of water data, how good are data. And one of the things that we can at least say remote sensing gives you quite objective data. There are different models, but they come to almost the same results. One of the beauties of remote sensing is here we see a map of Mongolia, and we see a map of the rainfall minus the evapotranspiration in millimeters per month. The redder areas are where we're losing water, for example, lakes where it's evaporating. In the bluer areas, there's where we're gaining water. And you see an enormous spatial variability. So we know what is happening where. If we look at the sort of classical way we normally have this type of information, particularly immediately almost in real time, we have just a rainfall graph, and you see for the same months that we showed on the slide, we have actually only this information. So in planning, it helps us a lot to have this spatial information. I'm now going to a specific case where we have used remote sensing for, first of all, knowing how much water do we have available and how has this been changing the last years, maybe due to climate change. So we look at water accounting at country scale, we zoom into basin scale, and then eventually we look at a reservoir that is upstream from an irrigation area. And of course, we can then also look at rules that we would need for reservoir release, particularly if we have data almost real time available. If we look at the basin, this is the Tonle Sap Basin in Cambodia. We can see that there's a lot of rainfall in the western part. There is a drought in the center where the Tonle Sap Lake is. And we see that there is quite a bit of variation. We have an average of 46 million cubic meter, whereas the minimum is 124 and the maximum 170. If we look at the water, the evapotranspiration, and we can actually measure that quite exactly because of the energy balance, we can see that there's a lot of spatial variation there as well. So the two we can then use for a water balance, how much do we still have left? And here comes an interesting part. We can see that most of the water is actually not used. There's a large amount available water, and there's actually very little really managed of that. But if we look into these subbasins, we see that the green subbasins, we have very limited amount of water used, but in the red ones, we have quite a bit. And exactly the area where we're interested is one of these red ones. So the managed fraction there is really, really quite high. And that means that we have only limited amounts of improving the water storage, and that we need to be very much on top of it during the season, and that we need this real-time information that we get through remote sensing. If we zoom in further, we have the same reservoir here on the left bottom side, and we have an irrigation system that we look into in much more detail with the blocks and the different canals. And here, I think what shows very well what the value is of remote sensing is we see on the left side the area that we have remote sensing imagery from. We see on the top of the right side, we see how we normally would get information on water productivity in the field. And you have one point that represents a large area. But if you see the bottom, you see that there's an enormous spatial variability that can help us in saying, well, some of these redder areas that have less water or less evapotranspiration and productivity, they, of course, have some sort of problem that might be an infrastructural problem, which we can then attend, or it might be a management problem. And the green areas get sufficient water, and we could see if the management is better there and learn from that, or we know that there's little needed in infrastructural improvement. If we look then into the areas from a completely pixel-wise evapotranspiration, and we look at the deficiency of water, we see that on the top that we have in the areas near to the reservoir, we have good water supply, and further away we have less water supply. And we see some areas that are continuously having less. And that are some of the areas that, of course, we need to look at if we're talking about better climate resilience in the future. We can do the same sort of analysis also for the length on the canal, and we see less of a variability. So it's not so much the management over it. We see, of course, that in the tail end there's less water, and we can do it over the blocks as well. So we can then make a good analysis where we need to target our improvements or improve our management. Now, we have done this also for a irrigation system just before we start the intervention. And here you see a map in Kyrgyzstan is this, where we have in green the areas that have a good productivity, and in red the areas where we have a low productivity. And you see that a number of the farms that we are looking into, they're numbered from 1 to 8, have a good productivity, so not much is needed, but there are others where we need to do a lot, like 7 and 8, they're much more reddish. We also saw that in the same water user associations, there are 2 areas that are red and therefore have a low productivity, and they're encircled with the blue circles. And that is where we have most of our attention. Now we go one step further even, and we have a tool now that we're trying out and looking into an irrigation system where we have control over the water supply, so a piped irrigation system. And we follow almost the water, the evapotranspiration and the water availability on a daily basis. And we can give, you see on the right hand on this side, we can give an information on a daily basis if there is too much water in blue, or if there's urgent need of irrigation in red. We're trying this out at the moment in a large irrigation system of almost 150,000 hectares. And hopefully this works quite well, and we can improve considerably, number 1, the water productivity, but number 2, also unexpected events. We can react on an almost real-time basis on unexpected events that we expect much more in climate change. And that brings us then to a tool that eventually gives us an idea about variation over the years and how is this changing, so we can plan better and see better what is coming in terms of changes, to something that on the field can actually help us in scheduling the irrigation and therefore increasing the productivity, even in case of completely unexpected events.
Thank you, Dr. Biepma. We need to wrap up.
One last one. Yeah,
okay.
This is the last one. I like to always also think of what other local solutions can we have. I mean, we always take water loss or the evapotranspiration that you need, of course, for the photosynthesis as a loss, but you can also, of course, lead it back into the water circulation if you do a sort of circular system for water, not only for all the other materials, but also for water. And that can be done in indoor cultivation. And I think this is an area where we can still make a lot of progress, particularly close to the major cities that we have in Asia, and thereby freeing up quite a bit of water. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Biepma, for presenting the use of remote sensing data to make informed decisions related to water management. Next up, we have Dr. Baksha Lahari from Mehan University in Pakistan, bringing in an important dimension of community perspectives related to water resource management. Over to you, Dr. Lahari.
Thank you, Chatarangi. I'm sorry, I don't have the PowerPoint presentation because I'm traveling, so I couldn't prepare this the PowerPoint presentation. And right now, luckily, I'm in Glasgow with my family. So I will give my the talk on this the soil salinity landscape in Pakistan's irrigated agriculture. Earlier, Dr. Mubin has given a very comprehensive information about the Indus Basin. Just I focus on the salinity landscape in irrigated agriculture of Pakistan. Pakistan has a really very nice the irrigated agriculture and the irrigation network working very well since long time. with the passage of the time, the irrigated agriculture got a really problem of the waterlogging and salinity. And then Pakistan government realized that it is really a serious challenge. So they introduced several projects, the strategic projects to control the waterlogging and salinity. Some of the very important projects are the SCOP project, which was initiated in early 60s. And that really brought a lot of benefit to the irrigated agriculture and control the waterlogging situation. And then a surface drainage system was also introduced in a different parts of the irrigated agriculture. That also brought a lot of benefit. But unfortunately, the salinity remained the main problem, and still it remains there. There was no any kind of a step that has to be controlled to the salinity. So because we know that in the irrigated agriculture or the Indus Basin brings around annually 15 million tons of the salt that is being sprayed on the irrigated agriculture, and annually that has deteriorated the land, especially the agricultural land. And right now it is estimated that around 6 million hectares, which is around 40+% of the land under the salinity affected. So these are the really big challenges for the irrigated agriculture community and the professionals and the policymakers. With the passage of the time, we all know that because IMI has done a lot of work in the Indus Basin, and they know very well that in 1997 to 2001 or 2002, there was severe drought in the country. And because of that severe drought, there was a lot of shortage of the water for irrigated agriculture. So people installed a lot of the tube wells to extract the groundwater. And this groundwater also contains a lot of the salts, and that has also aggravated the situation of the salinity. Again, because of this climate change, there were several the failures in the last 2 decades. If you go to and see the history of the country, every after 1 or 2 years, we had failures in the country, and that has also again increased the waterlogging situation and the salinity. So realizing these situations, the government of Australia provided the funds through the Australian Center for International Agriculture Research, and that the funds is being managed by the international community and national partners, and more important is the local community, the farmers. We all three are working together in this project, and that project is based on the lower Indus Basin irrigation system that starts from the Multan downwards to the coastal. So that project really is more focusing on the farmers' perception of managing the salinity, because the farmers locally manage the salinity, but there is a huge gap. What these farmers, because they have a very excellent ideas and the concepts they are managing. But on the other hand, the international community or the researchers, they have some different perception of managing the salinity. So realizing that the situation, we three, the level organizations like the community organizations, we call it the farmer organizations or the farmers, then the professionals who are really working in the field with the government organizations or the non-government organizations, and the international, the organizations in like Dr. Mubin's organization, CSIRO, and the university, Charles Sister universities, and the other two universities from the Australian government, and 3-4 partners from the Pakistan, sites, like the Mehran University, like the Multan Agriculture University, IUCN, and so they are working together to support the farmers, how they are managing the salinity and how this international community can support them to understand the problems. So we are working together at the field level. So we have the 3 bright spots at different locations at the extreme south of the Indus Basin, like the coastal side, and the southern Punjab, and the central Sindh province. So these are the spots, hot spots, are the bright spots area where we are working on this salinity management. So
sorry,
I think,
Dr. Ashari. Okay.
Yes, I stop here, and I will ask any questions if you have, then I will be available to respond. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ashari. My apologies for getting your name incorrectly previously, but that was a very informative session on the importance of combining environmental dynamics with social community perspectives if we are to manage common resources like water. Next up, we have Mara Al-Mahalala from the Water and Land Ecosystems at the CGIAR to enlighten us with some of the key highlights from the Commission on Sustainable Agricultural Intensification. Over to you, Mara.
Thank you, and hello everyone. I hope you can see my screen. So my name is Mara, and I am presenting the Commission on Sustainable Agriculture Intensification today, or COSI as we call it. So first, a quick overview of COSI. COSI is an initiative led by the CGIAR CRP on Water, Land and Ecosystems, which is housed at the International Water Management Institute. Now, 21 commissioners form the backbone of COSI, all of whom are from the Global South. So what does COSI do? Well, COSI is all about innovation. Specifically, it is about influencing investment priorities and approaches to innovation in agricultural systems. And this is important. This is important because, as Aditi pointed out earlier, we are at a stage where every decision matters. And what COSI is trying to do is to build an evidence base that can help us all make better financing decisions, which will hopefully get us closer to achieving the Paris Agreement goals. Now for today, I will be shedding light on one of the studies that COSI has produced over the past year, a study on the global innovation investment gap. This study was commissioned jointly with the UK FCDO and the Climate Shock Campaign, and was conducted by IFPRI, who used the impact model to project different investment scenarios up until 2030. Now, using the model, the study estimated that there is a gap in investments made into agricultural innovations of somewhere about $15.2 billion every year. And according to the model, this figure can be broken down into 3 main areas. First, agricultural R&D, which could benefit from an additional $4 billion every year. Then we have $6.5 billion needed for scaling climate smart solutions, and $4.7 billion for water modernization, which includes the improvement of water infrastructure and improving water use efficiency. Now, the golden question is, what does this investment of $15.2 billion actually buy us? And I've put in this infographic to shows some of these returns on investment, which span different things such as reducing global hunger and contributing to SDG number 2, and then reducing GSG, like greenhouse gas emissions, and reducing agricultural water use and deforestation. But I won't go further into details because in the interest of time. However, we do want to point out that we are by no means saying that all we need is additional money and then everything's solved. We still need other investments in things like policies and extension to be able to reap these returns. However, I would like to zoom in a bit on what returns on investment we could get for water and agriculture. So according to the model, if we increase annual ag R&D spend by $4 billion and then complement that with an additional $4.7 billion for improvements to water technology and management, we would buy ourselves a 10% decrease in agricultural water use, a 21% decrease in nitrogen pollution, and a 14% decrease in phosphorus pollution, which is not too bad. These returns are measured against the business as usual scenario up until 2030. Now, the key takeaway message here is that these additional investments are actually very small compared to what is actually spent on agricultural subsidies around the world every year. They're actually just a tiny fraction, and yet we think the benefits can be substantial, especially for promoting more sustainable use of water resources, and especially in the face of climate change. Now, to conclude, I would like to re-emphasize that this is just one of the several studies that COSI has produced. And while this has looked at how much investment is needed, other studies have looked at how it could be most effectively invested. And so now I'm inviting you all to visit our website and to take a look at all the different pieces of evidence that we've produced and that we are working on and drawing on to build our case for more and better investments in innovation in the global South, because again, every choice matters. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Mara. That was a very useful summary presenting the resource mobilization needs or gaps that's required to ensure food and water security, especially under climate change. Our next speaker is Dr. Laurent Oumans, who is the first Secretary of Water Management and Climate Change at the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Vietnam. Dr. Oumans will be presenting on the agro-water climate nexus in Asian deltas. Over to you, Dr. Oumans.
Yes, please start my slideshow. I would like to take you first to the local level. We have seen that at the local level, a lot of things are happening in terms of climate change, but also a lot of action is still needed, as Nita just explained to us in this session. I will introduce a farmer, Mr. Tuan, on the left to you. He has been cultivating sugarcane on an island in the Mekong River in the delta of Vietnam. Next slide, please. But it was very challenging for him to cultivate sugarcane with an increasing salinity intrusion, as the speakers from Pakistan have already also explained, increasing drought and a decrease in the prices of sugarcane. Next slide, please. So he was switching his crop from freshwater sugarcane to brackish water shrimp. And instead of fighting salinity, he has now embraced salinity, which is in line with the current policy switch in Vietnam. Next slide, please. And he not only changes a crop, the actual adaptation to climate change in the Mekong Delta is a very complex transformation based on various transitions. The landscape has to change. As you see here, the shrimp pond pond is still competing with the sugarcane of his neighbor in terms of he spoils the sugarcane with the salinity. So it's a landscape transition. It's an energy transition. As you see, he requires energy, preferably renewable energy. It's a transport transition because the sugarcane was taken out of the farm by boats. Now he needs a road with a cold chain for his shrimps. So altogether, it's a very complex transformation. Next slide, please. And this is one of my main messages. The climate change needs to be embedded in wider deltaic transformations, as we have seen in the life of Mr. Tuan. And even beyond his life, the many Asian deltas are sinking due to groundwater extraction, and they have difficulties with their sediment budget because of upstream dams, and there is a lot of urbanization going on. So these wider deltaic transformations need to be accounted for also when we want to address climate change. Secondly, we have to value sustainability. Many Asian deltas have been seen as a mine to resource water or to extract sand, or there's an abundance of resources that can be taken. Rather, it turned out that the resources are increasingly scarce and need to be managed. Such as the integrated water resources management paradigm. But I think even beyond that, we should try to develop a caring system for the Asian deltas in order to get to a resilience. Then for that, we need a new contract, a new balance between society and nature, where we decenter use of resources and we incorporate care for water bodies. And there is a perception also among many Asian people, especially indigenous people, that water is not only a source of life, but water bodies are living bodies. That need to be taken care of, and they behave in lively ways in terms of rivers becoming angry or rivers that go crazy. I think the forces of water need to be managed in new ways. Next slide, please. So then when we come to this analysis where we started with the local case and we build up the complexity of the context around it, I come to certain messages for the COP. And these are complexity, care, coordination, and capacity. Complexity, I think we need to keep the issues complex. The colleague from Pakistan already indicated how complex the management of water allocations is. And I think also the climate change is triggering a lot of complex dynamics that we still hardly understand. So complexity should be embraced. Care ethics and politics is, I think, needed to go beyond a management that still contains a kind of a distance between us and the water. The water is an object that we manage, a resource. No, I think we have to find ways to create more bonding between society and water, and the care ethics and politics can be a way to do that. Thirdly, coordination and a comprehensive approach to the water agricultural nexus is important. In Vietnam, we are starting an agricultural transformation program whereby we really work on the nexus of water, agriculture, and climate in order to get trade-offs for each other in the positive way, and we try to avoid adversarial impacts. And fourthly, capacity. There's a lot of capacity needs. I only mention here the capacity to design nature-based solutions, but there are also many other capacities needed in the institutional field, and also to create innovation, as we heard from the previous speaker. I thank you very much. Next slide for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mans. Thank you for presenting the major challenges faced by the communities in Asian Delta, especially using people's stories, and also for providing an outlook for future direction. Next up, we have our final speaker. Last but not least, Dr. Giriraj Amarnath, who is a research group leader from the UMI, to present on mainstreaming technology to gain solutions for climate risk mitigation. Over to you, Dr. Amarnath.
Thank you, Satrangi. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I'm great honored to be here in the Water Pavilion to speak on behalf of the consortium of partners put together this presentation. It's about mainstreaming technologies for climate risk solution. Before I go into some of the adaptation solutions, I think a lot of the speakers have already spoken. I think one of the biggest challenge in climate change is about managing floods and drought, which is very evident given that over 2 decades we are talking about 3 billion people who are affected with an economic loss of over 700 billion. While the aid to the developing countries are still increasing over here, but substantial development is getting undermined with the climate shocks that we have seen over the years, including this year has been one of the extreme events again for the year of 2021. So I think without proper adaptation, the communities, the vulnerable population living in the societies in which are extremely going to be affected in the years to come. That's where we saw the presentation from Aditi also highlighting the climate change scenarios that are being presented by Aditi. Now, to set this context, it is important for policymakers to come with a simple and handy maps for ministry development partners to understand where the risks are there and what I am supposed to do in the coming years. I think this is where the digital tools, satellite technology, GIS, and many other platforms can enable policymakers to provide a digestive assessment of a country like Sri Lanka, how much percentage of area is affected by drought, so and so, like the other exposure of that. I think these really calls for integration when it comes to the NDC and other partnership where we are aiming to achieve it through the SDG and others. So critical here is identifying the vulnerability is very important. And taking from there, it's not about defining problem, but it is also important to come up with adaptive solutions. So I just want to summarize, given the limited time here, we are building a massive digital tools and system that can conjunctively manage both floods and drought. So we are building a continental knowledge products for both floods and drought through the Water Secure Africa initiative. I think this is the first of its kind, I would say. Building a cloud engine based monitoring and modeling systems are getting developed at a sub-national level approach. And then using this data and again, taking into the modern tools like cloud platform from the Google, we were able to provide drought triggers and indicators wherein the government of Afghanistan were able to declare the drought using the knowledge product with the collaboration with World Bank. So this really important is not about data are available, it's about timely action from early warning to early action. So this is a tool which we developed here, provides scientifically driven triggers, and then the policymakers can make a use of this information to make it not just for determining drought, but also for the larger drought resilience strategy. And it's not just about keeping these maps and data, but also translating this into a usable knowledge products. For example, with Sri Lanka, with World Food Program, we work and providing an outlook for high-level policymakers to understand what I'm supposed to do with the seasonal forecast, with the drought monitoring information in the next 3 months. Likewise, we work with Southern Africa, entire spectrum of region, while this is Asia hub, but we build a lot of South-South learning of how this knowledge products can be scaled to other countries. Right? The other important technology, I think, in the disaster risk management, there is always nothing that we see that we can address the comprehensive risk. So there is always a residual risk. So IMI built an innovative risk transfer mechanism, what it called index-based flood insurance, which is successfully tested and proven by various counterparts in South Asia. And we have tested over some thousand households. The insurance company provided a compensation of over $150,000 US. It's important that the other private sector believe in digital data and knowledge products. So today we are proud to say that how open access data from European Space Agency and others providing increasing mean for using this data for the communities which are highly affected compared to the traditional way of looking indemnity, calculating claims, etc. So I think we have come a significant way of translating the benefit of digital tools and knowledge product, right? So my take-home message here is that I think we are mainstreaming technology, and being in COP event, I think people believe in technologies and how it is very relevant to climate assessment. And I think this is a critical of mainstreaming technologies, not just for presenting the information and services, but also helping the development partners like ADB, World Bank, etc., to help the countries to determine this NDC commitment. The second thing is we always see in the COP a commitment of $100 billion in financing green bonds and etc. I think we are very clear that digital technologies can really play a role, not just looking at climate, but also important in the water goals of achieving the sustainable water management. With that, I thank here for giving this opportunity, and hello from Water Pavilion from COP. Over to you, Chaturanga.
Thank you, Dr. Amarnath. That was a nice presentation to end, giving us the hope that we can use technologies, innovative technologies and digital platforms to manage climate change impacts. So I'm sorry we've run out of time. We did have some videos lined up for our audience, but the links are given there in the program outline, so you can view them on your own time. And I really want to thank our distinguished experts for taking some time off to come and share their knowledge. Wish everyone else who has joined us from all over the world a pleasant day, and thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.
Chaturanga, thank you. So we're going into the
next session.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, don't give up on us yet, please. We've got 20 minutes.
Sorry. Okay, moving on to the next session. Simon, you will take over?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So we're in the last 20 minutes or so, and we will come to a hard stop. So can I just check with colleagues at Pushpin, how long do you need to do that illustration? Do you need 10 minutes?
I'll be finished in 5.
Okay, Ali, so if I just spend 4 or 5 minutes with Laurent, and Laurent, if you have some key pink bits that you pulled out, and then we'll give you the last 10 minutes. Ali, is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right, so if you're prepared to pick it up in just under 10 minutes, and then I'll just, well, what a journey this morning, this afternoon. I'm not so nervous as I was an hour and a half ago. I just think that was great, great from a number of perspectives. The journey that we've been on in that hour and a half, and I've just got a series of notes, and I just wanted to take you through some of those because, yeah, just quite important. I think what I did pick up was this idea. Well, I've got about 10 ideas. I'll run you through these. One of the ones was this decentralization and this matching of scales. Everything can't be done centrally, and that we all need to contribute from the individual up to communities, up to nations, up to transboundary systems. And to do that, obviously, we need wider inclusivity. So this idea of taking stakeholders with us, incorporating stakeholders far more than we have done in the past. And maybe that's what we're seeing out in the streets of Glasgow, out in the streets of many capitals, is that requirement. And I think within that, let's also be specific about gender and the need to engage more strongly with women. And I say that particularly, I think, from a research and development angle. Some of the other messages I picked up is this, more so than a lot before, is this idea of a systems approach. And, if you're about 5 years ago, it wasn't that common to talk about systems, but a lot of our speakers today, a lot of our interventions mention this idea of systems thinking. And I think also this idea that we're already in change. We're seeing this change. A number of interventions again today said, right, we're experiencing this. We're experiencing changes in droughts, floods, changes in water quality, changes in demand. So this idea of changes in water storage, this idea of changes in extreme events, this change in demand, And indeed, that change in water quality, both siltation, salinity. And I think that's also drawing on this argument that it's no longer whether there's too much water, too little water, but is that water fit for purpose, and fit for purpose for society, but for purpose for the environment as well. There was a number of colleagues who spoke about innovations in both approach and management. And again, with that, there was a subset about irrigation. It was great that we had a presentation to start thinking about, right, what are the economics, the costs, and the potential gains, the benefits. And I think we need to unpack that more so. But yeah, and that idea that small investments relative to existing subsidies could bring around a great change for us. So I was really taken by that. And I think this idea, all the speakers talking about evidence and innovation was so important. And then that takes us really to the final two presentations, which again took us back thinking about new approaches, this digital approach, and this idea for bundled solutions. No longer was a single solution useful, but this idea of how do we mitigate, how do we adapt, and this idea that we don't need to think about water, but we also need to think about other wider needs, systemic needs, and there's water, energy, food, transport, the synergies and trade-offs, and in that again, system trade-offs and that systemic transition, and the role of both engineering, nature-based solutions, but also governance and economics. So I think that's what I've taken away immediately from today. I will distill on that this afternoon, this evening, and provide some further thought to colleagues. But Laurent, I did, and Chatarangi, if you had anything that you picked up, please come in and just say.
Yes, thank you. I picked up three key issues, and I'm very excited about that. In the first place, yes, water is a benign source of life, but it can also be a destructive force. And I think in that sense, water provides a lot of opportunities to address climate change in adaptation, but also using its force to go with the flow, to use nature and its forces and functions. But yes, we also have to have a sharp eye for risks and risk reduction, whereby, for instance, all these innovative technologies can be helpful. Second, I see that it's striking to see that we will lose 1/3 of our glaciers, and in many places we will lose rainfall. So we somehow will have to adapt by creating more water retention capacity. Pakistan was a good example, and I think that will be a huge enabler for future development. The water sector should try to compensate somehow the loss of glacier water by storing it somewhere else, and even at the local levels, I see in many deltas that water storage is critical. If it is not done, people will use groundwater. The groundwater tables are lowering, and this actually should be avoided in order to use the groundwater only in emergency cases. So that's a huge challenge for the water sector. And then I see a third issue that we can bring up in the COP, and that is the challenge for the agricultural sector to improve the water productivity. Even if we store water and if we are treating it in benign ways, agriculture has to improve its water productivity, and that will be a driver of future agricultural innovation and development. We are not only looking for crops that produce more, and also not high value crops, but I think high water productivity crops are the future for agricultural development. So those are the takeaways that I have from the session. Simon, over to you.
Great. Laurent, thank you. I'm just very conscious that in setting this up, I did try and strike a gender balance, which I didn't quite achieve. And Aditi, you're still online. Mara, Chaturanga, have you can I ask you, would you have got any interventions that you would like? And just whilst I give them a minute to think about that, anybody else who's here, please email me, email Wagisha or anybody you know within this with any messages. And Lauren, if you could send me your messages, that would be great. And we'll get them in some sort of summary. Chaturanga, have you got something to offer us? What did you take away?
I think I found it very fascinating, and the amount of the data-driven work that's been done in the Asia region is pretty astounding. And I think mainly use of remote sensing, those technologies that Dr. Amarnath presented about, all of them were, I think, very valuable and provide some hope for the future. So I think we need to utilize this, and also in Sri Lankan context, also invest quite a bit on data gathering and analysis. And also one of the other presentations, like Simon, as you said, the needs for investment, I think that really highlighted the gap between what's needed to be, the resources that need to be mobilized in order to achieve something, and it can be done if there's, financial investment in these areas. I thought that was pretty important. So yeah, all in all, I think there were some really good takeaway points. And also, as Dr. Lashari and Dr. Uman's also mentioned, like the community angle need to be taken in, because at the end of the day, we need to have their buy-in if these interventions are going to be sustainable and long-term. So yeah, some of the key thoughts from my end.
Great. Aditi, please.
It was, as Chaturangi said, a lot of very useful lessons that came out. I thought one point, and we have some other sessions today looking at mitigation. I think this really needs to be the decade of the mitigation, because this is our pretty much the golden opportunity for keeping temperatures within 1.5 to 2 degrees. If we miss the opportunity in this decade, then there would be a lot of almost impossible catching up to do. But when we talk of mitigation, we almost always just think of carbon and greenhouse gases. We forget water. I think some of the mitigation measures are very high water footprint. So I think looking at mitigation from a water perspective will be quite important. The other thing that's important to remember is all the adaptation that we talk about will reach its limits if the warming goes up over a certain point, especially for small island developing states, especially for the high mountains. So therefore, again, coming back to mitigation, important to keep those temperature within 1.5 to 2 degrees, because we have to remember that all our very good tools will fail unless our warming is limited. So that's something I think we just need to remember, that adaptation will only go so far unless we mitigate right now, and mitigation can have negative impacts on adaptation and vice versa. So looking at trade-offs and synergies would be super important. So
Aditi.
Thanks, Simon.
Aditi, great, as always, thank you. Mara, can I invite you to, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, these presentations have been very insightful, and it's great to see and hear all the different perspectives and solutions to a lot of the different aspects in the water, climate, agriculture challenge that we are globally facing. And what I would like to point out is these are exactly the kind of solutions that we should be investing in to fill that gap. So what we have identified in this study is that there is a gap, and these are the kind of solutions that we need to be investing in. And just to point out also that we often hear about all of these like technological or policy or institutional solutions, and there is no lack of these, but there is a lack of solutions that are being invested in and followed through with. So we need to be embracing the risks of experimenting with different solutions, and we need to be collaborating together to learn from each other and building up partnerships to make sure that knowledge is disseminated and that we are building on what we are doing, and then continuing to invest with full knowledge and disclosure of any trade-offs that can appear in any of the different dimensions. And yeah, I mean, it was really great being here today and listening to everyone pitch in with these amazing insights. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, spot on time, 8 minutes, I think. Pushpin colleagues, sorry, I'm not sure. Ali, is it you? Or yeah, I've lost it. But Pushpin, let me pass it to you. We have 8 minutes before we will be cut off. Thank you.
Right. Let me just share my screen.
Yeah, hi. So I'll just be representing Pushpin and briefly running down what we have noted down here. And we really learned a lot. Thank you so much for all the information. We really liked what was said in the start that we are already in a climate change world and that Asia is playing a big part in will play a big part in mitigation and adaptation, and mitigation should be happening right now. And it's very encouraging to hear that despite the challenges and issues that we are facing, there's really calls to actions being taken and being started, innovations and technology that we are seeing to help with water management and climate change solutions. So just a few things that are listed here: issues and challenges like temperature change and resulting disasters from those, as well as how commodification of water and economic and societal impacts are being seen, water challenges and survival issues that were mentioned just a while ago, and how Asia has been the most disaster-prone regions as seen in the statistics. So we do need to keep pressing and raising that awareness and spotlight for water, for water, and also opportunities and actions that national leadership is extremely important in taking action in this, and finding water financing on local levels is something that we should be focused on, as well as localized resilience, advanced technologies and partnerships going beyond boundaries and addressing it in the global level. And yes, like mentioned, evidence-based data is what we need. Remote sensing and water productivity tools will be very useful, and community efforts, policies, and extensions, as well as care, complexity, coordination, and capacity. So really, that's answering how we can think radically about coming up with solutions in this climate change world. Yeah, so thank you so much. That's just the summary of the graphics that we have been able to come up with.
Great, okay. And so, Donna, do I understand you will refine that this afternoon and then we'll publish it later? Is that how this happens?
Yes, I believe so. We can give it to you later. So we're just going to edit or refine some things, and we can pass it on to you.
Yeah, okay, I've got to be careful as chairman, but we might just want to talk about a couple of bits. I'm not quite sure, just a little one on water quality would be nice, and something on systems, but I don't want to abuse my position here. And so let me talk to Alicio and Wagisha, and we'll come back to you. But great, thanks for this, and I really look forward to seeing it, and hopefully we'll speak with Jennifer and maybe getting it put onto the screen in the pavilion. Okay, so as we come to the close, I just want to thank you all for contributing, participating. I hope you got something out of it. I certainly did, both in knowledge and in terms of process. That was very, very good, very useful. I hope, like I say, I hope there was something in there to inspire you, and that you go away from here thinking, I must do something different. So yeah, I'm not, Jennifer, if you're there, can you tell us how we can publish this online? Where can we get that YouTube link to, so people who couldn't join now but can watch it later in the day, over the coming days? I don't know if Jennifer's online, she might have to have left, but yeah. Okay, well, we'll find out, and we'll share it with you all if you can join the session tomorrow. So tomorrow, Alicio, do you want to say something? You've got a minute to say something about tomorrow, 2 minutes to say something about tomorrow. Alicia?
Yes, thanks, Simon. No, of course, you are very much welcome to tomorrow's section, where we will talk about climate resilience and disaster risks. We have a very nice program aligned, where we will be discussing, let's say, about concept of water resilience, let's say, on a global levels, but also how to implement this concept really in the field, as already Neta anticipated during her talk today. So and how to better really connect the global agenda to the local, what is happening in the local at local level. So we are very much looking forward to the session, and of course to have you also tomorrow at our session. Thanks, Simon, and thanks, by the way, for the very interesting session. It was really, I really enjoyed it today.
Good. Alicio, Wagisha, Pia, thanks a lot. Wouldn't have been possible without you. Everybody have a good rest of the day. See you all hopefully tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.